Hi, I'm Danielle, and welcome to Unboxing Humans. Each week, I speak with incredible humans about the weird moments that led them to where they are today. My guest this week is Greg Besner. Greg is a serial entrepreneur as the founder of 4 companies, an adjunct professor at NYU Stern School of Business, and the author of the Culture Quotient, 10 Dimensions of a High-Performance Culture. Greg's current company is a super premium beach brand called Sunflow. He is also the founder and former CEO of CultureIQ, a global company that helps organizations to create high-performance cultures. He founded CultureIQ in 2013, and he and his firm have assisted more than 1,000 organizations and millions of employees to strengthen their company cultures. In 2018, Greg was ranked in USA Today as the 8th best CEO in the United States among a pool of 50,000 companies. He also was named the EY Entrepreneur of the Year in New Jersey in 2003. Greg is frequently published in business and leadership publications and podcasts, and is a keynote speaker at leadership conferences around the world on topics of business, culture, and the future of work. Greg earned his MBA from the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania and his BA from Rutgers University. Greg and I ended up chatting for nearly an hour. So this week's interview is actually going to be split up into 2 different episodes. This week, Greg and I will be talking about his early ventures. Tune in next week to hear about Greg's newest company, Sunflow, and how he works with his family to make it a success. Greg, welcome to Unboxing Humans.
Thank you so much for having me. It's very exciting.
I am incredibly excited to speak with you today because you don't meet many people who are serial entrepreneurs and have the success that you do. I would love to start there. Looking at your companies, they span marketing, financial services, workplace culture, and now beach chairs. How do you innovate across these industries?
Wow. Thank you for such flattering remarks. I really appreciate it. And, when I started my career journey, I never expected to work in so many industries. I actually sometimes envy people that have spent 20, 30 years in one industry because you can really build an incredible network and incredible expertise. For me, different challenges, right? Each time I enter a new industry, although I now have a lot of experience founding and building companies, the learning curve is required as you enter a new industry. As you mentioned, my most recent industry, which I had planned to be launching a beach chair and accessories business. So, but back to your question, let me make sure I answer it correctly. Specifically, what is actually almost forgot what you initially asked. You overwhelmed me with flattery, and I got confused there.
I asked, what is it in you that makes you innovate across these industries?
Right. And how do I do that? Yeah. So it's funny, and it really comes back to people, because some of the products that I've launched really were not my expertise, but really helping to commercialize some innovation from someone else, which I'll talk a little bit about. But really, when I started my career, I dreamed of being an entrepreneur, and I didn't really dream of a particular industry. I dreamed of building a company, building something from nothing. And as my career progressed, though these industries don't seem connected in any way, when you really look at my complete journey, you can see how some of these experiences converged. And then it becomes, oh, well, now that makes sense. And I'm happy to talk you through that journey, because if I try to just explain how and why, it may not make a lot of sense if I just kind of jump into one or another.
That was actually my next question. Is there a common thread that we don't see from the outside, but you see from the inside?
There is. And again, they are very different industries. And fortunately, some of the skills of building a team, building a product, building customer base, building a company, some of those things are core and common across all industries. But yeah, really getting expertise in one can be very challenging. So the common thread for me, which isn't so obvious when you look at my resume or my LinkedIn profile, gosh, I haven't written a resume in quite decades. So the common thread for me, I actually graduated from college and went to Macy's through the Macy's Retail Executive Training Program. And what a wonderful base of experience. You're 21 years old. I was 21 years old. And they train you for the summer. And then you manage a department in a department store. I had 21 employees. I had multiple product categories. And it was just a wonderful base of experience, but also just dealing with customers, dealing with employees, dealing with culture was right out of the box, taking that on as a young professional. But so years later, oh gosh, I guess I can just tell the story quickly. So for the next 7 years, I worked in retail and apparel. I ended up going back to graduate school. I went to my MBA, and when I graduated, that was my first career switch. I ended up working on Wall Street for a period for about 4 years, and really frustrated at the latter part of those 4 years because I really did want to be an entrepreneur, and Wall Street was, there's a term, golden handcuffs. The longer you're there, kind of the more lucrative it becomes, the more career progression you have. And I saw that happening. It was becoming, I worked at wonderful organizations. I worked at Goldman Sachs coming out of business school. It was a terrific culture and an incredible learning experience, but I really wanted to be an entrepreneur. So finally, fortunately for me, that light bulb moment happened while working on Wall Street. And I recognized a problem that I had worked at Goldman Sachs, and I a year and a half worked at Merrill Lynch. So one was the largest brokerage firm in the world, and one was probably the most prestigious brokerage firm in the world. And both of them had this same challenge for processing complicated equity transactions. There was a lot of paperwork, a lot of processes, and a lot of counterparties, and it was all being done manually. And that was my first light bulb moment that technology, and this was 23 years ago, technology was really changing so many industries. It dawned on me that in this very important high profile category of equities, high profile meaning these were typically the largest shareholders in an organization. They were typically the executives in an organization, the board of directors in the organization. They had these restricted equity grants, and it was all being done manually, all the processing. So that was my first business. So that was probably more obvious. I worked on Wall Street. I worked in the industry. I had domain experience. I recognized a problem, and I started the company. So that's the beginning of the entrepreneurship journey that actually makes the most sense. What wouldn't be as obvious is the next business, which was a fashion accessories business, handbags and accessories. Now that you know that I worked in retail, apparel, and fashion for 7 years before going back to graduate school, starting a second business that's in retail and apparel probably makes more sense. And then I mentioned earlier that sometimes it's the people that have an innovation that I'm helping to commercialize. In this second business, that was the case. I actually married back into the retail and apparel business my wife, Leslie, who I think you've had a chance to meet. Have you met Leslie?
I have. I met Leslie on video once.
Oh, okay.
But she's wonderful.
Oh,
yes.
Great. Thank you. I think so too. So Leslie was a fashion designer, and she had a vision for very special handbags that had very special fabrics and and some embellishments that she thought would make them very unique. And we were newlyweds, and we became partners. Her as a designer and product developer, and me helping her commercialize. And I remember going on that first sales meeting with her. We often made our business trips, vacation trips as well, as newlyweds, to try to see different parts of the world together. So we were in San Francisco. We walked into a little boutique. We asked for the owners. The owners came out, two lovely ladies, and we had our first sale. So that was our first entrepreneurial moment, commercializing a product and getting it on a shelf. So that was business number two. And I was running those companies. I was Leslie's partner, and eventually that business flourished, became bigger than my software company. So I was CEO of my software company and president of this fashion accessories business. So that's how two very different businesses could be launched by the same person at the same time. Really, they were really launched 2 months apart. One a software financial services technology company, and one a handbag and accessories business. It sounds like, how in the world would you launch two such different businesses? But now that you know my background, and then of course marrying back into the fashion accessories business, it probably makes more sense.
And how did you break away from the golden handcuffs
That
and
was really
take that
scary.
chance, especially as a newlywed? I mean, that's usually a stage where people say, "Oh, I'll stick with it so I can have stability for my future."
That's a great question. Actually, when we got married, we also had just bought a home, and neither of us had come from any financial means. So we had a mortgage, and we were planning a family. We were planning to have children. So we had a mortgage. We had Leslie left her job. She was a designer at Calvin Klein. I left my job. I was at Merrill Lynch at that point. So the two of us had no income. We had a mortgage, and we were planning a family. So it sounds scary now saying it, but at the time, it seemed like the right path and didn't seem risky. But looking back, I guess it was a bit risky, at least financially. But we became a double entrepreneur couple, where we were both entrepreneurs, and that was 23 years ago. It was scary. How did I break away from the golden handcuffs? Like many startup stories, when the epiphany happened, when the light bulb went off, and when it started working on my financial services technology business, I was still working on Wall Street, but I started working nights and weekends writing a business plan and really planning what this business could look like, this new business. And at some point, I had to make a decision, and it was a scary decision. I compare it to kind of walking a high wire and then rolling the net away. At least that's how it felt at the time. It felt like the safety net was being rolled away. I came from a very modest background, and it was very uncomfortable working so hard 10 years into my career, going to graduate school, working at amazing organizations, and then walking away to start from scratch. It was scary, but it was a real life test, because I always said I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And the question was, am I someone that talks about being an entrepreneur, or am I someone who is actually working to become an entrepreneur? And I answered that question, and 23 years later, fortunately, things have worked out with those businesses.
And they have continued to work out with the other businesses as well.
There were
So
two more. There were two more
yes.
businesses. So just to close the loop on the first two, so Restricted Stock Systems was launched, my financial services technology company. The first software was to be installed, and it was scheduled to be turned on September 14th, 2001. And of course, 9/11 happened a few days before that. So it was not a straight line. We act like many organizations. We were a New York City-based financial services technology company. It was a very scary time in the world, of course, and then for me, as you mentioned, walking away from Wall Street, all of a sudden I had a company that none of my potential customers were in a position to buy these products and roll out these products. So it was about a year before things kind of got back on track. But 7 years after founding the company, we did sell it to a public company. I became the president of my company as a subsidiary, a division of a larger public company. And the handbags and accessories business was, as I mentioned, became bigger than my software company, which is really neat because my wife and I were partners. We ended up launching UGG Australia handbags. If you remember UGG footwear, well, remember it's still around, but you might not remember back 15, this was, almost 20 years ago. This is when UGG footwear was really taking off. Hollywood was embracing it. It was in a lot of movies. A lot of movie stars were wearing it. And we acquired the rights to produce Australia handbags and accessories. So our little handbag business that was literally our mom and pop. Well, I guess we weren't mom and pop yet. We were having our second baby. We were a little mom and pop business, and we acquired this license for UGG, and then True Religion jeans, which was also very popular at the time. We acquired the license. And when I say acquiring a license, that means someone owns that trademark. Someone owns UGG Australia. Someone owns True Religion. And you can license the trademark for a particular category, which is what we did. We became the licensee, meaning we paid a royalty to use that name for this particular handbag category. And that was very successful. And so that business did very, very well until the licenses expire. So it's different than launching a company where you're building your own brand. And in the case of my business, we sold my first company. But in the handbag business, you can't sell someone else. You build a company and you license and you can generate profits. But at the conclusion of the license, you can't really sell the company because someone else owns that brand. And that's what happened. So we had a very successful run with some brands. And so those are the first two companies before we get to the next two.
And I have questions about those. So before I get to next two, I'm thinking about the year over which time you thought you were going to be generating revenue and you weren't. What kept you going?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we were at the very beginning of the journey for that company. So we raised capital September 29th, 2000 is when we actually took capital from some investors, $2.5 million, which was more money than I'd ever seen in my life in 2000. And I was entrusted by a group of professional investors and angel investors, professional meaning venture capital fund, and some angel investors, some individuals that invested. They gave us $2.5 million, us being the company and the team. And a year later, after building the team and building the product and having our first 3 clients sign up, we were scheduled to launch. Of course, September 11th happened. So it was a year into the company. So for the next year, we had to continue building product, developing our product, we actually didn't find additional clients. It was very challenging to meet with clients during that time, but we conserved capital. At the time, the first internet bubble had just burst. So people were already tightening their belts to make sure they weren't overspending. And we were very frugal, and we just lasted it out. It wasn't clear how long this dark cloud would be over the world, but we waited it out. And there were a couple of years of no new clients and no new revenue, but we survived. Thank goodness.
And what inside of you made you say, let's keep going, let's wait it out, let's keep trying versus, oh, well, we tried, sort of, they say act of God, right? These circumstances happened. I have this house with a mortgage. I have this new family. Maybe I should go back to a more stable job, or maybe I should try a different business. What kept you going?
Yeah, I actually never thought about stopping. It was really the beginning of it. We had raised this capital. We had some really great first clients. At the time, it was Deutsche Bank, Charles Schwab, and Bear Stearns. Funny enough, Bear Stearns is now part of JP Morgan, but they still had contracts with us. So we had clients, and we had a very small team, and we were conserving capital. We never thought to give up. We just kept building our products, making them better during that time. And then when our customers reopened for business, we were ready. And there were a few years of no new clients, but when things reopened a few years later, we went from 3 clients to 4 clients, 4 clients to 7, 7 to 20, 20 to 30, 30 to 60. By the end, we had 100 plus corporate clients. And again, it's challenging all the way. There are ups and downs when you have a small business, but we made it. Yeah. So the business it was a relatively small company. We had 25 employees and 100 corporate clients, but we built something special. We really never thought about giving up. I'm happy I didn't think about giving up. It didn't seem like an option. There was, again, the safety net was gone. There was no turning back.
And I'm curious then, what made you decide to sell?
So we were 7 years in. We did have investors at that. When we sold the company, we had raised, during those tough times, we eventually had to raise some additional capital. We had raised $4.8 million, and our investors 7 years later, some of them had been taking risk with us, investing in a small new business, taking risk. And 7 years later, as we started to mature and have a nice portfolio of customers, it became an obvious acquisition target because we were one solution for an enormous industry. So the company that bought us was a $5 billion financial services software company. The company was called Computershare, and they provide, I think they're the largest in the world, providing stock plan administration and stock registration. And it's much more efficient for a company that already has infrastructure, sales channels, billing, global offices. It just made a lot of sense for us to be part of a large organization. And for me, I wasn't trying to, many people have different goals with businesses. Some people want to build a multi-generational business. They want to build something and have their family, have it be a legacy and pass down to the next generation. For me, the excitement was to build something from nothing, to create something from an idea, to build a company. And as long as it's in the right hands when it's sold or handed off, to me that's success. Goals for different entrepreneurs.
And so jumping back to the handbag company with Leslie's unique designs, what made you as a pair, decide to go after a licensing deal?
Yeah, it's a great question. And when we started the business, there was sort of one famous handbag designer. I'm not sure if you or your listeners would even remember the name Kate Spade. Does that sound? Do you know Kate
Yes.
Spade?
Well,
Yeah.
I'm a big Kate Spade Designs fan.
So
And they're very, they're unique and whimsical bags, especially.
Yeah. So Kate Spade was she was a handbag entrepreneur, and she was in New York, and very inspiring for a young couple like us.
Yeah.
And actually her husband was her partner, and he launched a men's company as well. So that was part of the reason, one of the inspirations for launching the business. But there are very few companies that become the next Kate Spade, right? So Leslie's line of handbags, which was called Leslie Sue New York, was in 100 amazing department stores and specialty stores. But for that particular industry, software, you create software and you sell the same software and over again. For handbags, you really need volume and scale to drive down production costs. And as a small new brand, we weren't able to we got to about break even, but it was very hard to get to scale, because not everyone can become the next Kate Spade. And while we were working on it, UGG Australia was taking off, and one of my contacts was able to get us a meeting. And UGG was already a pretty big company. It was a public company, and it was based in California, the United States, the headquarters. And we were able to get a meeting, and we went in, and Leslie was pregnant with our second baby. And it was right toward the end of when she'd be able to travel. We had heard the president of UGG could be a very challenging meeting. The woman in charge had a reputation for being no nonsense, and we were very nervous to go in because we're literally a mom and pop business going to meet with the president of a multi-billion-dollar public company. And we walked in, and the president of the company saw Leslie's belly, her baby belly, and the rest of the meeting was put on hold while the two of them chatted for the next 45 minutes. And the last 15 minutes was us talking about how we would commercialize UGG Australia handbags, and the rest is history. It was really a relationship thing, right? The president really wanted to get to know Leslie, because Leslie's the creator, and she was going to be creating products. And as they developed that level of comfort, we were awarded this this handbag license.
I think far too often we hear about women going into a meeting while pregnant and being discriminated against. And this is the opposite. So I'm so excited to hear, what did they talk about?
Well, it turns out the president of UGG has a daughter, and we were expecting a second daughter. They were both business women managing family and career. But then they ended up talking a lot about Leslie's vision for UGG Australia handbags, right? Because it's a very different category than footwear. Like what will the handbags look like? Will they be leather with UGG printed on them? Will they be expensive? Will they be inexpensive? And Leslie's concept was really to make sheepskin handbags, which didn't really exist at the time, but really with a lot of her embellishment and unique product features. She's very function and fashion, so plenty of pockets, plenty of zippers, plenty of flexibility, plenty of sizes, plenty of colors. So as they talked, even though it seemed like just a personal chat, it was really an evaluation to see if Leslie was the right fit. And your comment about women pregnant potentially being discriminated against because maybe they'll be busy, raising a child instead of building a company. A few months later, when we were awarded the contract, Leslie was in the hospital in labor, and our second daughter was born the day before our first wholesale trade show. And Leslie worked right up until she had her laptop with her in the hospital room. Again, that was her decision. She's an entrepreneur, and she decided to work right up until the last second. And then I went to the first trade show. We had a few employees at that time, and I went to the trade show, and I called her from the trade show the next day. She was still in the hospital, and we had our first sale, and we were able to celebrate it over the phone. We celebrated having a family, and we celebrated our first success with this new journey within the handbag business.
That is such an incredible story, and not surprising given what I know about Leslie, having met her. She's fantastic.
Well, people glamorize entrepreneurship and glamorize raising capital, and you know this because you're in your journey building your company, but it is not always easy, and there are often very few resources, right? When you start a business, you typically don't have employees yet, you don't have brand equity yet, you don't have customers, maybe you don't have a product. And so when we launched this handbag business, and as we were having our second child, we couldn't go on maternity and paternity leave, right? Mm-hmm. We'd love to. Fortunately, our work and our life were integrated. So we were married, we had work-life integration. But after Leslie came home from the hospital, a few months later, I mentioned I was at a trade show, we had our first sales. We needed to go find factories. We needed to build out the company. A few months into this, we got on an airplane, and we still had no money. We were still newlyweds and had two nascent businesses. So we got on an airplane to China, Leslie, myself, our 2-year-old, and our 2-month-year-old in three economy class seats with the four of us, 24 hours to China, to Shanghai. And we went visiting factories, and we had to bring the children because Leslie was nursing. So here we are in 3 economy seats, the four of us, landing in China for a week and walking through factories with a 2-year-old and an infant. But there was no waiting. These customers weren't going to wait for their products. And that may sound like we made poor decision on timing, but we actually loved it. We walked through those factories smiling. And the factory workers just had never seen anything like this, right? They had never seen a family come in with babies. And Leslie's Chinese American, so she speaks Mandarin. So she would walk up to sample makers and production people and with her babies and speaking Mandarin. And it really helped our business, actually, even though it wasn't easy. And it was scary because now we have a mortgage and 2 babies and 2 businesses. So it was a really crazy time, but it worked. It all worked out. Thank goodness.
I mean, what I'm hearing from all of these stories is both of you just showed up authentically, which is part of what we talk about on this podcast. Is you said, here we are a young family. We have this business and We are all here, part of the business, and how showing up authentically helped you.
That's right. We were full work-life integration, and sometimes that works for people, and sometimes it doesn't. But for us, we had no choice, and people responded to it. It's funny. 20 years later, Leslie and I we'll talk about our current companies.
Yes, that's a good segue.
Yeah. Yes, but we just on that particular topic, our daughters are now 19 and 21 years old, and last weekend we traveled. The four of us traveled together on business. This time we had 4 seats, not 3, but still economy. And we went to Florida together from New Jersey, and we went to an event where our new company was a sponsor. And people kept commenting all weekend how they love the Besner family, how it's so nice that the family works together. So now the daughters are not being pushed in baby strollers, but they are actually working with us and helping us, which, talking to you now, I hadn't really thought of it in that contrast. But here we are 20 years later, and both daughters were once again on the road with us for business, but this time helping. And I'll tell you more about that, but it really reminds me of the fact how things are different, but the same.
Tune in next week for the rest of my conversation with Greg, where we discuss Sunflow, his other 2 businesses, and what it's like to be a serial entrepreneur. Since you've made it to the end of the show, I'm going to take a wild guess that you enjoyed listening. So go ahead, check out the links in the show notes and give us a follow. We both know you want to. Unboxing Humans is hosted by me, Danielle Boris. To learn more about my work, go to danielleboris.com. And don't forget to grab your copy of my new book, The Energy of Weirdos. See you next week and have a fantastic rest of your day.